Apple's iPhone 10 hitting the shelves today. Let's take a look at some of the most buzzed about components, from the Emoji to the Face ID. Joining us now, Ed Lee, editor of Recode, and Venky Ganesan, managing director with Menlo Ventures. Welcome, both of you. Ed, do the lines that we're seeing around Fifth Avenue, John was there earlier, and that we just saw opening out in California, does it matter if we don't know the supply side situation?
Doesn't matter, because even if you have to wait, even if they didn't quite make enough to meet that current demand, people will wait for it. I think, the 8 is there as sort of an alternative, as a plan B is sort of the idea, but people want the 10, which is astounding to me, because even from my own sense of it, it's like, oh, well, the 8 is cheaper, it's really great, more people will buy that. Instead, what we're seeing is people saying, I want to give you more money, not less. Like, I want the bigger one, the better one. And so it really underscores how Apple really is has always been this striver brand, that you just want the best from it. And so, again, to Apple's credit. Well,
Venky, you say that the Face ID has a potential to be a game changer. What are you referring to there? You're talking about security or something else?
That's right. They say the eyes are the windows to your soul. What Apple is telling you is the face is the windows to your personal security. I think the Face ID is a game changer because it changes and adds a new modality for cybersecurity, which is an existential threat for all consumers.
Ed, I'm wondering what you think about this early demand picture we see for the 10. On the one hand, yeah, it's great. People are lining up for this 1150,
right, yeah.
Phone. But we've always known that the early people will pay ridiculous prices to have the new thing. Does it matter more what we see 3 months, 6 months from now, and primarily what developers are willing to do specifically for the 10 versus these other models?
So I think it's a great question. I actually got a chance to play with it a little bit. Our sister site, The Verge, did a great job doing a review of it. What's interesting is that it's more the form factor to me that I think is really interesting. It's smaller than the plus size one, but it does more. In terms of the actual apps, in terms of the actual what the developers created for, it's still not there yet. It's like sort of like the early days of the iPad kind of a thing. And I think the first few months, it's the hardcore early adopters will say, oh, I got this thing. Regular users, if they get it, will be like, all right, it's just more expensive. What do I get for this aside from animated emojis? It's going to take 3 or 4 months before you really see the fully fledged, like, what can you do with this? The AR kit is, I think, a potential killer app for them in terms of how developers play into it. And I think, again, we have to wait to see how that goes.
Venky, we've been talking about that off camera this morning. I mean, I think a friend of mine tells me the MLB app will allow you to point your device at a player. Stats will pop up about that player. Does this elevate AR as at least the most exciting innovation on Apple's front burner?
Yeah, so I think the iPhone 10, actually, it's great because it's a 10-year point on the iPhone, and they've come up with what I think is a platform shift. AR, VR is clearly the next major platform to emerge, and I think the functionality in the iPhone 10 actually makes some of these AR functionalities really come to life. We at Menlo Ventures are pretty excited about the investment opportunities we're going to find there.
Can you elaborate on that? I know you're invested in some security companies, which goes back to your previous point, like BitSight. Is this a consumer-facing issue, or you think it has bigger ramifications across the valley for some of these startups that you're working on?
Well, look, I think the security implications of iPhone 10X are huge because what you now have is a second modality through which you can validate. Now, consumer identity, as the Equifax breach showed, is a really big issue. And one of the ways in which consumers can start protecting themselves and feeling better about doing things digitally is by using the Face ID. And I think third-party developers are going to do it.
Ed, how are you going to judge whether Apple really is moving the market as we head into 2018 toward the functions inside this phone? Is there a particular industry, whether it's gaming, whether it's retail, whether it's social media, that you think really has to glom onto the features in this to show that it's got legs and it's going to pull the rest along?
So, like with AR Kit and this sort of new environment that they've created, I liken it to the emergence of the App Store, right? Apple never imagined an Uber would have been created out of the app economy, but it is. It's a $70 billion company that would not exist without Apple and other smartphone makers. The AR Kit, if it creates the same kind of environment where new players can emerge that they have never even imagined yet, that's a real sign of success for like what this new hardware allows it to do. The other side of it, something that we haven't really talked about as much, is the services business, right? We talked about it a little bit yesterday in terms of, how that's growing. 20, 30%. I know there was a one-time adjustment in yesterday's numbers. Apple has never had a real cogent media strategy. Given how wide their platform is now with all their devices, they're a broadcaster that way. If you think about it, they just haven't really taken full advantage, whether it means buying more exclusive content. I know they're going to spend about $1 billion to do that, or going after sports rights. I think the NFL is up for grabs in a few years, and I think that could be a real, interesting foray for an Apple or an Amazon or Google, whoever it might be. All these guys are well positioned because they're so well distributed, and I think that's what I want to see from Apple next, more than the hardware.
The question is whether or not they're well distributed enough for a league that's used to being on your rabbit ears, right?
You're on CBS and NBC. Millions of people are going to watch it. Amazon took Thursday night, and a few 100,000 people were watching it. They paid a lot of money for it. It was a good first step, maybe, but it hasn't really proven that they're mass market the way that broadcasters are. But you never count Apple out. I mean, it's approaching $1 trillion. It's got a lot of money. It can do lots of stuff.
That'll be an interesting thread to watch. We'll leave it there, guys. Thank you. Ed Lee from Recode, Venky Ganesan from Menlo Ventures.